Hello everyone, good evening. Okay, so let me get right into it. As I think probably everybody knows that NASCO is a clearly differentiated business model. What they do is they focus on complex molecules, which are either first to file or para 4. They don't do generics or they don't do off patent molecules majority of the time. So the challenge with this kind of one-off lead or molecules where there is a lot of erosion coming in, so the challenge really is to establish some sort of sustainability. If we can see sustainability for few 2, 3, 4 years, then I think the value will be created. So that is going to be, I think, the focus of the presentation. Because of this differentiated and a little bit one-off led model, the business grows in the step function. It doesn't grow linearly. It grows a little, then it settles at a level, then it again grows. It takes a jump, then again it settles a little. So there's a step function there. So the current investment thesis is that the step growth is imminent, where the average pad base, which was 500 crore approximately for last 3 and 4 years, 3, 4 years, it will go to 1400, 1500 crore for next 2, 3, 4 years. That is the central investment thesis. The majority portion of investment thesis rests on Revlimid. So there are two points in Revlimid. That one is NATCO has superior settlement compared to competitors. We'll cover that in more detail later on. The superiority aspects come because of there will be few months of exclusivity in FY23 if they're able to get FDA approval, and NATCO seems to have higher volume allowance compared to competition. This is the aspect of superior settlement. And then another thing is what innovator has been saying. So Celgene, which is acquired by Bristol Myers Squibb, BMS, what they have been saying in their calls is that they are trying to avoid a cliff and they are trying to effect a gradual price erosion. So these are the three central points of Revlimid. Then post Revlimid also there are some interesting molecules. Few of them I've listed here. One is Pomalyst, which is a $2 billion molecule, FY25 patent expiry. Then there is Imbruvica. NATCO seems to be the first filer in the tablet form. It's a pretty big molecule. Then so we'll talk about that. Then what has happened in domestic portfolio is that the hepatitis, they had a big bump in domestic portfolio because of hepatitis. And because of the nature of disease in hepatitis, what happens is it's not a repeatable business. So that business has gone down considerably over the years. And then there have been price controls in their oncology portfolio because of two reasons. Primarily, domestic business has suffered. We feel that we're very close to a bottom in domestic business, and I think the business should pick up from here. And then they're trying to enter into cardiology and diabetic C&D portfolio. If it becomes successful, it can add to growth. Then coming to rest of the world businesses, I think Canada is the major one, where they have done approximately 130 crore revenue in last year. This business can scale up further with an imminent Revlimid launch in some time in FY22, and then also Copaxone. Brazil business, they've been trying for quite some time, but it's not a success story, or they're still working on it. So it's a work in progress. And then the optionality is the agricultural foray, but I don't think agricultural is a near-term story. It's a little bit medium-term story. The strategy is similar, where they want to do 993 or first-to-file molecules. So currently, one molecule they're working on is on the CTPR, for which the litigation is going on. This is for India. And there's another molecule where we have some interesting insights to offer. We'll talk about that. And then if they can take the India business global, that would be quite something. But that is more, I think, a FY25 kind of story. Okay. So I'll now hand it over to Rajat.
So thanks, Rupesh. I'll begin with the brief about the business, about the company Natco Pharma. So The company was started in early 1980s, uh, uh, and there at that point in time it was largely focused on domestic business and multi-therapeutic segment instead of focusing only on any one or two niches. So they ran the business like that for 20, 25 years, and then they reinvented themselves around early 2000. That's when they started focusing only on one therapeutic segment, which was oncology. And idea was to launch only first time generics in India. So with that strategy, they continued, and in the late 2000, they around 2007 and 8, they started focusing with a similar strategy on the USA market, where they started filing in complex para 4 ANDAs in the US market. So overall, there are four business segments, largely four. So domestic oncology is one, where where the company is almost market leader with 15-20% market share in this in the areas where it operates. And then second segment is domestic non-oncology. Largely, it has different kind of specialities, but couple of things that have happened in the recent times is that one is they launched in licensing of in licensing arrangement, they launched a hepatitis C product, and that did very well for the company over the last few years. And recently, they have launched cardiac and diabetology, which they want to ramp up now. So, cardiac and diabetology will be the second category therapeutic segment in India, which NATCO wants to focus now. And then the other important segment is USA, where they are deriving 45% of their sales and more than 50% of their profits. And then rest of the world, where largely Canada is the major business, and Brazil is work in progress. And finally APIs, where some of them are used captively and some of them are exported. Then moving on to the next slide, where we will, Rupesh, can we go to the next slide? Yeah, thanks. So, so here we would like to highlight three to four important aspects of NATCO's business and their strategy. First of all, NATCO always focuses on low competition, high complexity products. Most of their filings are para 4 ANDAs, where in USA, where NATCO challenges the existing patents. And so far in its short history of operating in this niche, NATCO has demonstrated a very successful track record. So Copaxone, for example, one drug Copaxone that was launched in 2017, this drug still generates 250 to 300 crores in profit for NATCO. So it's the fifth year going on, fourth or fifth year going on. That's and in even in the current year, that's the kind of profit that we expect. NATCO expect this drug to generate for them. Similarly, Doxil, Fosrenol, and and including Copaxone are some of the examples where competition has been pretty much limited. There is hardly any competitor there. I mean, just besides NATCO, just one or two more generic companies have come, despite the drug being launched 4 to 5 years back. So this demonstrates the kind of drugs that NATCO really wants to focus on. Second aspect is the high potential market opportunity aspect, where the drugs that NATCO launches, they are targeting huge profits from those drugs. So to begin with, they target uh, being first to file in those drugs so that they get 6 months of exclusivity. And in that exclusive time period, there is no other generic operating in the market. So what really happens is that in that time period, NATCO gets to milk maximum profits from the sale of those drugs. And Tamiflu was one such opportunity for them. And over its life cycle, Tamiflu is expected to generate actually 700 to 800 crores in EBITDA. And Copaxone was the another successful hit for them, where They are still continuing to make around 250 to 300 crores in annual profits, and over the life cycle of the drug, it is expected to generate around 2,000 crores in profits. And in Copaxone, Natco is the second company to get the generic approval, and till date, there has not been any other generic approval after Natco's approval. Moving on to the third point is the long gestation. And in our view, this particular aspect acts as an entry barrier in this business. So some of the filings that Natco had to do to launch the product happened actually 7 to 10 years before the launch. So I will just take the name of two drugs here. One is Nexavar and one is Revlimid. Both the drugs actually were filed around 2010 and 11, but none of them have been launched yet. So it shows the kind of work that goes into preparing for the drug, and that probably explains why not a lot of people are after such opportunities, and why only few competitor ultimately end up coming in some of the successful drugs that Natco has had over the years. Then finally, what Netco wants to do is replicate its successful products in USA market to the different markets. So to begin with, they launched Tamiflu in Brazil and Canada as the first generic in those geographies. And in fact, in Brazil, though very small market, but goes on to show about the strategy of the company. In Brazil, despite being in the second year of the launch, there is no Tamiflu generic player operating in that market. And going forward, Natco plans to launch Copaxone, which is a very successful drug for them in USA so far. In Canada, they want to launch this drug in Canada, and finally, they want to also launch Revlimid in Canada going forward. So that's the strategy that we have. Yeah, Rupesh, back to you.
Okay. Quickly, just 10-year. Sorry. Okay. So this is just quickly a 10-year track record. Two things we would like to mention on this slide. One is FY17 is when bulk of the Tamiflu came. So the revenue moved from 1,000 to 2,000 crore, and around FY19, the Tamiflu contribution is minimal. Even in FY20, it's close to zero. So given that one-off nature of the opportunity of Tamiflu, their revenue has more or less stayed at 2,000 crore. So they have been able to replace a pretty large Tamiflu revenue base with Copaxone. This is, I think, probably underappreciated fact. That is one. Another thing is very high gross margin business, which is very obvious. Last time the step jump happened, they were doing 100-150 crore in profits. It moved to around 500 crore kind of run rate because of Tamiflu and Copaxone. And we now feel it might stay like that in 21, maybe a little bit of 22, but after that we should see a step jump in FY23. So that is another thing. In the bottom sales mix, and one or two things that we would like you to notice. One is excluding hepatitis C, the base business has kind of grown at 15% CAGR kind of rate. That is one. They struggle a little bit in FY20 because of before May 19 elections, they kind of struggled there in terms of distributor margin. There was a cap on distributor margin, so they struggled there. And then Hep C was a spectacular growth in FY17, if you see, and then that number from 500 crore, it has come down to like 120 crore, and it might even go down from here if one listens to con call. So Hep C is completely out, and this is probably the base business which should probably grow. And then in rest of the world, I mean, Canada is the major player in the rest of the world. Okay. So this is a little bit more about history. So on this slide, again, whatever I said, this is a pictorial probably representation of that. So what happened is this blue is hepatitis C, and this color right here is the US market. So there was was a big bump in domestic in FY16 and then 17, and then it completely went off in 18 and 19. The business went down to like we saw 150 to 100 crore, 100 crore kind of 100, but they've been able to replace that with Copaxone here. So you can see US business contribution going up. And then, so that is another point here. Another aspect, sometimes I think that if they hadn't done Tamiflu, which provided this perception of a one-off business model, and if they had just done Copaxone, I feel the perception of the business would have been very, very different, given how difficult Copaxone has been and given kind of profitability it generates for them. This is sometimes I feel that way. Now coming on to the right, maybe only thing probably we want to highlight is Revlimid. So like Tarun said, like Rajat said, Revlimid filing or litigation started in 2010, somewhere here. The settlement happened in 16. The product still hasn't been launched. It will be launched sometimes later. So it's a similar pattern. I mean, they probably take a 10-year view of the product, and it takes a long time to go through the story. So this is this is kind of summary of whatever we have talked about, how Copaxone came, Tamiflu came, all that. So this slide maybe we read offline. Okay. Next is Tarun. Hi, Tarun.
Thanks, Ray. Thanks, Rupesh. Hope everyone is able to hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Okay, great. So far, we have talked about the history and the business model. Now, way forward, what is it which is making it so very interesting? So one of the component in the business dynamic would be related to their US formulation. Today, it is contributing approximately 40% or so. Going forward, we feel that they got a very strong pipeline, and which again ties back to their business philosophy. They want to be FTF and exclusivity kind of arrangement. Specifically between 2020 to 2025, some of the key drugs which has been highlighted over here, and just below that, the broad market potential for those specific drugs. So the key call out over here would be that couple of drugs which are going 2020, 21, and to some extent 2020 are the one wherein they got a first to file. Obviously, they are going to get a window of 180 days to market that. Along with that, some of the cases they got settlement, and we'll go deep into it. Some of those settlements are very, very favorable. That's a very broad lay of the land. In detail, Rupesh, if you click once, please. Yeah. So some of the drugs we really want to talk about. Not all of those and not in very detail, but just to be very specific about some of the points. Just to demonstrate, they got a very prudent mix in terms of large opportunity. In between, they would look at some of the opportunity which are comparatively small, but there is no competition at all. Key example would be the first one, which is Lapatinib. Very recently, they have launched it. And this would be close to a 50 crore kind of an opportunity for them in INR. But the good thing is that there is no competition in sight at all. So this becomes a perpetual kind of a business, no competition, no price erosion. They'll neatly pocket 50 crore in a very small molecule. Next, around the corner was supposed to go 2020, but looking at the things, quite possible it would be early 2021. They got FTF. Along with that, they also got settlement. Even otherwise, there are just two competitors. Innovator has settlement with Teva, which is also on the same lines which Natco got. So again, a good 250 million kind of an opportunity with very, very limited competition. Next would be the Afinitor or Jortris. This is also a very interesting opportunity in our mind. Again, the fact would be that one of the highest strength molecule, they got the exclusive FTF on that. So 10 mg is the highest molecule in this composition, and they got exclusivity on that. Even otherwise, just 4 to 3 people are there out there in the market. And in totality, this is again close to 1,000 million opportunity. Now comes the big one, which is Revlimid. We are going to talk in detail about that. But yes, this is again a very, very significant opportunity, close to 8 billion and growing. And somewhere people would have apprehension as to what if things move here and there, and what if there is a cliff situation. So to back that up, they got again a couple of line items which are spaced out in a way that those are going to fill the space which gets deleted or emptied by Revlimid. Another opportunity, Embruvica, we are going to talk in detail about that. What we really like about this is that a neat 6 billion opportunity, and there are some nuances to it. We'll come to that in detail. Another interesting opportunity, which is down the line, maybe around 25, 26 would be Pomalyst. They got a settlement, not just for this market, but quite possible that going by indication, they will get settlement in Canada as well. So big opportunity, 2 geographies. And if you look at the table, what really stands out, and the one which has been highlighted with a red circle, is the fact that in most of those molecules, they have been the first to file. Also got settlement on big opportunity. So again, reaffirming that business model thing, most of the time they'll go after complex molecule and they'll settle it well. Rupesh, can you please move to the next one? Yeah. So far, it was more of a 30,000 kind of a view. In specific, some of the molecules wherein we are very positive. Nexa, where we mentioned it's around the corner and there is not much of a competition for a 250 million kind of a drug. Imbruvica, the catch here is that the market split would be like 83% tablet and 17% capsule. For this 83%, they are the only player, except there is another guy who has came in very recently, Zydus Cadila. For 17% market capsule, initially the market was for capsules, and a couple of guys like Silpa and Hetero got a settlement with the innovator. But of lately, the market has shifted to tablet composition, and that is where there is no new settlement which is there. In a way, this neat 83% market is with them. A very meaningful opportunity. Next one is Pomalyst. As we mentioned, it's close to 2 million. This is a REMS product, by the way. So knowing the complexity, etc., we have a fairly confident view that this again is going to be a very big opportunity for them. Likewise, they are talking to get a settlement in Canada market. So we are factoring in close to, all of this will take Canada market to close to 250 crores. So broadly, this was a very snapshot view about the US market. Revlimid being a big opportunity, we really want to talk in detail about that. What are our understanding? What are the nuances of it? And for that, I would hand it over to Saptarishi. Saptarishi, please.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, hope you guys can hear me. So Revlimid pe first we would like to talk like why is this remains a limited no competition and the competition remains limited over here. Why? So while there are other filers like Sun is there, Mylan is there, but Oro has also filed for the same. But the problem is that there are two things. First is that the supply of the drug is limited given the fact that it stems through a REMS distribution system. So due to which the first thing is for bioequivalence studies, it is the procurement in itself is very, very difficult. So the smaller onco-focused companies cannot actually do this because the supply of the supply of the drug is so limited that for bioequivalence studies people cannot procure it. So that's the bigger challenge for new competition coming in. Another fact is that in the patent there are two litigations. There are two patents. One is 217 and 800, which is still active. So which the current which all the filers who are filing is they are like still restricted for getting the access. This is just for the fact that these patents are expiring in 2024 and 2026. So in a way, this kind of shields the innovator as well as the players who have already got the settlement. So NACTO has already fought the settlement and they have won this in an out of court settlement. The second factor over here is the price erosion will be limited. Why do we feel that? Because wherever there is a settlement, the innovator is always filing the settlement through where the market share is always limited. So at no point of time we are seeing that there would that there would be a lot like there is just not incentive to cut the prices, because at the end of the day the innovator cannot a new player cannot increase his market share through price cut, because his volume is going to be limited. So this is the second factor that we feel that the price erosion will be protected. And the third is, why do we believe that NATCO is going to win over here, is because for a very simple reason, that NATCO got the approval first. So if you can just see the table at the bottom, like the settlement date that NATCO received is actually December 2015. So 2016 beginning they got it settled. All the others players got it very late. So as per the terms of the settlement, NATCO is his market share is limited to single digit in the first year, but it is the only player who has got who has been able to settle it the market share to his market share is actually capped to 33, one third of the total volume of the drug. Alvogen has got the approval, but his market share is, even after 2020 till 2025, the market share remains limited till in single digit only. And we believe that given the fact that Dr. Reddy, Lotus, Cipla, all of them got the approval later, so given the fact that Alvogen got it later than NATCO, so these guys would their settlement terms would have been would be even inferior. This is just an inference from our end. The other filers, we still believe that they would be still battling it out on the two patents which are still live, which are 217 and 800. So just to summarize, like NATCO has got the best deal among the competitors, and this will help them. And of course, the fact is that since NATCO got the approval earlier, so they would be getting an exclusive certain exclusivity. We are assuming at least 6 months would be there which would be provided to NATCO. So given these are the facts that that makes us believe that NATCO is going to be among the competitors. NATCO is going to be the biggest winner. Can we move to the next slide? Or so yeah, settlement should ensure that the price erosion would be calibrated, and like the price erosion would be gradual. It won't be like a steep decline where everybody feels. So innovator has also pretty much said the same, that that every year all the competitors would be getting limited yearly volume. So there is just no incentive for companies to cut the prices. And like these are the statements where like these are basically snippets from the con call where they have said that during each of the settlements, like how they expect that the price erosion to remain limited. Yeah. Next slide. Now we will come to the domestic business, which has remained under pressure in the recent times. So over here, the bigger chunk is of course coming from the oncology business. So oncology business in itself is slightly different compared to how oncology is perceived globally. This is just for the fact that in India there is no universal healthcare system, right? So the incentives for the company to launch new drugs in India is quite less. So just to give an overall fact, since in the last 10 years there have been close to 60 new launches of new onco drugs globally, but in India only 7 to 8 drugs have been launched, because there is just not incentive for the innovators to launch their drugs over here. So that, in a way, so in a way, this kind of restricts the onco play, but overall, in terms of opportunity size, India remains a huge market, because currently the total number of registered onco player in total number of onco patients in India is less than 50% of US, but our volume, our population is close to 3 to 4x of the US market. So in the long run, the opportunity size is there is onco would remain is expected to remain a very strong a very big opportunity over here. But in the recent times, the problem has been that a lot of competition has come in, because just for the fact that there have been very less number of drugs, and whoever has been able to once there have been few settlements post which a lot of drug launches have happened, given the portfolio have remained very limited, due to which there have been price cuts. But even during that period, if we can just if you can just tune in from FY in the last 5 to 6 years, Natco has been able to grow its domestic onco business at a 20% CAGR. Price cuts have not, while price cuts have and the price cap has impacted the business overall, but till FY19 the business for all the players were sort of shielded because the distributors took the hit. So this is actually the first year where we are, the FY20 was the first year where we saw that how the price caps restricted the business. But we do believe that the business of impact of price and of the price impact is of the price cap is not very huge, and but it, of course, it has impacted this segment in the recent terms. And COVID has, of course, impacted because the hospitals are shut, so people are just have not been able to go to the hospital to take their chemo treatments. Hep C, as pointed out earlier, Rupesh and Rajat, both of them have mentioned that the pool in itself has shrunk. And while the pool in itself has shrunk, and along with that, what has happened was a lot of competition again emerged in this segment also. So this has led to there has been significant erosion in this business, but the company has indicated that they are very close to bottom, because while the pool has been, because there again over here is that the competition has been so severe over here that there is just no incentive further to cut the prices. And given the size of the Indian population, this pool is the current pool is what so this is where the base is expected to remain stagnant. C&D division company has recently started in this. It has recently forayed into this. Like again, Natco in domestic also is trying to grow via a step function. So they are investing a lot. They have been able to grow. Recently, but yeah, they won't be able to offset the losses in the Hep C business in the recent terms. So that's what our view on the domestic front over here. Next slide. And I think someone ROW, I guess Arun is taking up.
Yeah. Thanks, Saptarishi. So for ROW, strategically, what we understand is that it's more to do with diversifying and having a broad-based earning pool. From that perspective, we have been hearing if I remember correctly, around 2015-16 also, they were talking about launching subsidiaries and taking Hep C franchise across the globe. Somehow that didn't materialize, but right now what we feel based on the action is that they are trying to establish themselves very firmly in certain geographies. From a rest of world perspective, Canada is one significant opportunity where they are scaling up gradually. Last year it was close to 40 crore revenue. This year it is crossed 128. So last year it was 40 crore. Last year it was 90 crore, and now it is close to 130 crore. So at a very small base, they are growing decently. And in terms of the filing, etc., the product that they are identifying over there, it's more of a replicating the US template to Canada. Revlimid, Pomalyst, Copaxone, etc. All of those things, they see success in US market, and out of that, they pick the right product for Canada. One big opportunity that we need to watch out for would be Revlimid for Canada. Brazil, again. So the differential factor here is that Brazil is a very tender-driven business, and there would be lumpiness. They are trying to get the inroad into it. Some of the good filing, what we see over here is that Tamiflu, as Rajat mentioned, 2 years down the line, they are still very successful. There is no competition for Tamiflu. Although this is a seasonal kind of a third quarter of the year, they would have some revenue. Another interesting filing they have is Everolimus. So this is close to 1,000 million opportunity in US. It's been 1 year they have been into it. So Brazil also in a very gradual manner, they are trying to build it. Right now, not too much to read into it, although management is project out. ROW and Agri contributing approximately 15 to 20%. Going by the numbers, we feel that it still will be kind of a 10 to 12% of bottom line accretion. But this is going to give the diversification which is much needed at this point of time. So broadly, that is about rest of the world subsidiary. Moving on to the new one, which is So recently, NATCO has established a subsidiary called Crop Health Science. 2019, they had a greenfield expansion in that Nellore plant, approximately 100 crore capex they announced, and then that eventually took to 140 crores. Couple of things, and that is where we feel that it is more than what meets the eye. There is possibly a bigger play over here. Right now, what we are seeing is more of a domestic business, but quite possible that they would be very ambitious about it to start with. And they got a filing which is a 9C. 9C is like a novel molecule in Indian terms. So they have filed for CTPR, Ranapixy, and also they have filed 9.4. 9.4 is a copycat generic, which is they got 9.4 filings. Along with that, they also got a couple of other. We are going to talk about that in detail with a dedicated slide. Overall, what we understand is that from a chemistry skill standpoint, they are very good at it. But front end of the market for crop science would be a new territory for them. Another key aspect would be a legal challenge. This is a FMC product. It's a very, very blockbuster product, close to 2 billion USD annual revenue for them. And they definitely want to protect it by all means. 2022, their key ingredient patent is going to expire. So what we really need to watch out over here is that what is the outcome of that particular court case which is going on in Delhi. Another important thing to watch out would be related to what we understand is that the innovator is going for an in-licensing agreement across the globe, so that for a disseminating business, whatever they can gather out of that. So from that perspective, if there is any in-licensing opportunity, or at least they get into a poison pill kind of a thing in India market, that is another watchable. The third key monitorable over here, and that possibly would be the biggest thing here, is that what is management commentary about the export market possibility. In the last con call, they indicated that their long-term aspiration would be a global export market for this particular molecule and any other molecule that they launch into this crop health science one. Specifically, the CTPR market opportunity, this has grown phenomenally in India. Launched in 2012, very quickly it had close to 2.5x revenue by 4 years. And now it is clocking approximately 15% CAGR growth rate. In market, there is a very positive perception about this particular product. So there is a pull to this. Globally also, so FMC got this portfolio product from DuPont as part of their merger and acquisition settlement. Within 2.5 years, they got a 40% growth in this particular molecule. As I mentioned, close to 2 billion market opportunity. Specifically in India, very limited competition. So as a context, in terms of the disposition of this particular molecule, there are two ways to dispose it. One is a solution and another is a granule. Solution 4 variants, all of those are in license with Syngenta. The granule form is with Costco. With PI industry, they brand it as Costco. In PI industry, Concall, etc., they are again very bullish about Costco prospect. They feel that this is some sort of an omnigold for them again. So that's the competition landscape for this particular product. We hand it over to Rajat for some financial and projection, etc.
All right, guys. Moving to the projections, so before we come to the numbers here, we can go to the assumption slide, which is the rest of the assumption link here. So what we are really saying is that Copaxone, which has been a star product for NATCO so far, we are saying its earnings actually, we are just reducing or eroding the earning of Copaxone by 200 to 250 crores by FY24. We should all keep in mind that this is a very sticky earning base for NATCO, and no competitor after NATCO has entered the market. Dr. Reddy is very close, but from the last 1.5 years, they have been close, but nothing really has happened. So, despite being the sticky base, we are still saying that, okay, let's remove 200 or basically up to 250 crores of profits by FY24 from NATCO's earning base from Copaxone. The other small assumptions before we move to the Revlimid assumptions. So On domestic side, we are just assuming 5 to 8% kind of growth CAGR, and with similar kind of margin profile. On the Canada and Brazil side, what we are saying is that from 120, 30 crores of revenue base, Canada can actually go to 250, 350 crores of revenues. In our view, actually, and this goes as against the guidance of 400 to 600 crores by the management in FY23. The I think key here is Revlimid launch, and that launch alone, that product alone, actually can contribute this much of revenue and very high profits here, more profits than we have imagined here. The other is we can actually go to the yeah. So just before coming to this, yeah, here only. So also we haven't assumed any agrochemical related margins coming into picture. We haven't assumed Nexavar launch, which we know is pretty much just around the corner. It can happen anytime actually. And the other two launches which may happen in FY23 and FY24, and these are decent launches, Everolimus and Trenda. So we haven't assumed any of these things here. And finally, coming to the Revlimid assumption sheet. So guys, what we are saying here is that Revlimid volumes will grow by 10% from last year base. But if you look at the history of the drug over the last 3 years, the CAGR has been staggering 22%. So we are taking 10% here. And price erosion, as you can see, we have taken in the base case around 20% in the first year and 40% in the second year. Given the arguments that we have presented so far earlier on, we believe there is a reason to believe this is a decent number and might not cross. In fact, price erosion could be lower than this. And finally, in terms of the EBITDA margins that we have assumed here, so we have assumed 50% to begin with, as per the guidance or the understanding given to investor community by the management, that such blockbuster drugs can actually generate 50% kind of EBITDA. But we have to keep in mind that this drug is the most successful drug in the history of cancer therapy. So can margins be higher? Well, they can be. So yeah, and this drug is the 10th features amongst actually this is the third largest in terms of revenues that it is generating in pharma industry in USA. So there are chances that margins can be much higher. In fact, without such drugs in the portfolio, we can see Natco is able to generate 80% gross margins and 30, 35, 30. In fact, at the peak of Tamiflu and Copaxone, it generated 42% kind of EBITDA margins at the company level. So I think this drug has got the potential to generate higher margins. We are assuming 50% here. Then some bit of assumptions here, which one can go through on its own. Now coming back to the overall projections or the financials that we see in the base case. So what we are really saying is that in FY20, PAT of the company was 460 crores. And in this base case, we are saying earnings can actually go 3 times to up to almost 1400 crores by FY24. Management had also guided similar kind of profits, but they had guided for the same by FY23. We are assuming the same by FY24. So this is the base case that we are saying that profits can go 3x in next 3 years. Yeah, we can move to the next slide. In the bear case, what we are saying is that no volume growth happening, and some more pessimistic assumptions here. But in terms of profit, despite in being in the bear case and not going with the aggressive assumptions, despite that PAT, we still see this growing by 100% in next 3 years. So we this kind of assumptions here give us the confidence. We can move to the next slide.
What are the risks? I mean, it's just Revlimid. So one thing is US FDA approval hasn't come through yet. The target action date was supposed to be but based on their track record, it should come, and there is still a decent runway of about a year before they have to launch. If it goes into FY 22-23 approval, then I think the exclusivity gains will go away. That is another risk. Higher price erosion than expected. It looks like that might not be the case, but who knows? I mean, it's so dynamic situation. Inability to gather market share if something in the supply chain or distribution is not right. Another thing is that if the Revlimid patents are outright invalidated, that was another risk. But with Dr. Reddy, which probably was the most serious challenge, and then Cipla settling down, and with all the other settlements, probably the risk of patent invalidation has gone down significantly. Another thing that can always happen is risk of adverse court judgments. So in one of the conf calls, someone asked that there is some lawsuit going on in California court where these kind of settlements where generic players are restricted on volume, they want these to be deemed anti-competitive. These kind of things can happen. Another thing which is not listed here, and which is that if market starts moving away from Revlimid, I mean, innovator is not just going to sit back and watch his profits go down. So that plan, I think, probably needs to be focused on if the market starts moving away from Revlimid. That is another thing. Domestic business, if it doesn't go back to, if it doesn't start growing, if it still continues to suffer, there is another risk. Two examples, for example, Valsac and Brilinta. These are two products, pretty decent opportunities, but NATCO got injuncted, and I think by the time they resolved or as time passed, these became several 10-15 generic players came, and they were not able to milk these opportunities. If they are able to scale up C&D division, if they are not able to scale up C&D division, that also would be a risk. Canada and Brazil, rest of the world business, very new. Whatever happened with domestic business of regulatory risk of price control, which we already experienced before May 19 election, something similar if that happens again. Agricultural business not clicking. So these are risks, but primary, I think the risk is Revlimid. The story is Revlimid, the risk is Revlimid. So now with so much risk, right? I mean, what we want to probably end this slide with the management actions and capabilities. So we have picked up these examples, 3 examples of management smarts. I mean, they have done several things wrong also, but as optimist investor, I think we're going to look at 2 or 3 examples of smarts. So one thing was Copaxone had 2 dosage versions. First example, 20 milligram and 40 milligram. Market moved to 40 milligram version because of, I think, lesser dosages. You don't have to come every day. So Sandoz was actually the first generic player, but Sandoz launched this 20 mg version before NATCO, but it couldn't launch the 40 mg version very soon. But NATCO was able to get this 40 mg version. So probably the first player to get the 40 mg version. And despite coming late after Sandoz, Mylan NATCO have 17% market share by value. I think by volume will be 30-35% kind of Nurse versus the 7% for the Sandoz. So this kind of shows the agility and aiming for the difficult version that way. Another thing is Copaxone is a highly complicated molecule. I mean, in terms of manufacturing, in terms of delivery, it's a very complicated molecule. This is one of the snapshots we got, and it shows that they are able to get it. I mean, they are able to do this manufacturing, and the delivery mechanism is pre-filled syringes, so they are able to do this molecule. This shows their capability. As I said it before, because of Tamiflu bump and because of Revlimid excitement, I don't think Copaxone story gets told as it should. I feel that way. Another thing is similar thing is happening in Imbruvica. What is happening in Imbruvica is there are two dosage forms, as they talked about, capsule and tablet. What Innovator has done is that there are settlements in the capsule form to Teva, Hetero, and Shilpa, but Innovator has moved the market from capsule to tablet. And then Natco claims that it is the first filer in the tablet form, similar to Copaxone, how it was first filer in 40 mg. It claims that it is the first filer in the tablet form. Another thing strategically, if you think about it, few years ago, when company got these settlements, right? When they started litigation in 2010, some settlements are 2015. It was not a very big company. They were making 100 crore, 150 crore of profits, right? And it's kind of David versus Goliath story that you want to take up on the big innovator. Then how do you do it, right? So it made partnership with US players to avoid the litigation costs, which are 40, 50 million, 300, 400 crore kind of number. And they settle for the lesser profit share, 35%. As the current run rate is 500 crore, so they can probably share or absorb some of the litigation costs. So a lot of newer settlements have 50% profit share. They will share litigation costs, but the profit share is 50%. So Pomalyst is I think the first example where their profit share will be 50%. Revlimid is an old settlement and they were a small company, so profit share is a little bit less. So these, although there are risks based on management actions and some of these examples, if you say, maybe they will be able to manage it. Yeah, so I think we are now at Q&A.
Thanks,
Wonderful.
guys. Start the Q&A.
Yes, Ankit, you can. I think we finished the presentation in just about an hour again. Congrats. Great presentation, guys.
Yeah, great presentation, guys. 2-3 questions. Starting with the way you guys are valuing this business. When you look at this, one-time opportunities which accrue for a year or even 3 years, don't you think in valuing the opportunity of Revlimid on a NPV basis and then looking at sustainable PAT of the company going ahead is a better way of valuing the company? It's a 17,000 crore market cap company. So let's say if you're looking at 2.5, 3 times kind of opportunity, the sustainable PAT for the company even beyond 25, 26 should at least be 1,500 to 2,000 crores. That was one question. Second question was on the domestic side. Domestic side, we all know that, since all of you track the company so closely, I also track and few others also track it. Domestic market on the oncology side has become extremely competitive. And Brilinta is a case in point where, on the day of patent expiry, you had, many players coming in and the prices of the drug reduced significantly. It's an AstraZeneca drug, and the price erosion was pretty severe. So in our case, we are assuming that it will continue to. So have you guys worked on the competitive scenario on the domestic side? How has the competitive intensity been on the domestic side? So that was the second question. Thanks.
One of the key issues that I've had with Natco and its business model is that the core business sustainability is not a guarantee to me. Now, when that happens, what we are kind of doing is that, along with what Ankit said, we are we base our earnings completely on what is going to come. That somehow I don't think that's a great model, or I'm kind of, mentally I don't get satisfied when I see that the current earnings are not preserved, and I'm kind of assessing the entire valuation or based on the growth that is going to come. That is one point I have. The second point is, what happens in most of these kind of drugs is that the innovator, like if you look at the Celgene history, Celgene का ये दूसरा drug है for multiple myeloma. So इसके पहले भी Celgene had another drug for multiple myeloma. Then they came up with Revlimid. And have you looked into the filings of Celgene for new, NCEs or other things which can kind of keep the market from Revlimid going ahead? So that is the second point. Third point is, have you also looked at other drugs which can be used for multiple myeloma. Like, for example, there is a new drug called selinexor, which has also been launched to tackle multiple myeloma. So in my opinion, that aspect, because a lot of the story is based on Revlimid, that aspect needs to be looked at really seriously, as you know what kind of NCE filings have happened for multiple myeloma. That's the second point. The third point is that I have is that so I was going through one of the on Celgene, where Celgene's CEO was there, and there was a Senate hearing, I think. What Celgene has done is that, the effective price of a tablet has gone up significantly, maybe like from $200 to some $800 in last 10 years or something of that sort, from what I remember. So it is not a volume growth that has happened, but there has been like, a 4x, I think 4x or 5x kind of a price growth that has, I mean, they just raised prices for absolute no change in the drug. And there was a, hearing inside the Senate committee. I mean, that video is quite popular on YouTube. If you want, you can go and check it. So I'm not sure what kind of what will happen after it becomes genericized, but that is one aspect I want you guys to look into it. I'm done. Maybe if others have questions, they can ask. Like, you should certainly look at Expovio, which is selinexor's brand name, because that's a new drug which has come into for MM. I mean, I have more questions, but I'll probably come later because they are more on the agri side of the things.
Okay, hi. Maybe Rajat, you want to take the valuation question?
So on the profit side, on the valuation side, yeah, like Ankit, what we have done is that we have not really gone into predicting to the extent that we understand what will really happen in every year. It's for the sake of presenting it to the larger group that we have done some sort of projections, but those projections could be anything. Anything can change there. What we really have confidence in that earning growth trajectory is going to be pretty strong from here onwards. So for doing present value or DCF or any sort of that thing, you really need to get into so many assumptions and multi years of assumptions. We have just tried to avoid it there, but our model here is that downside is really limited because earning growth is going to happen. And then when we say one-time earning or let's say step up function of profit growth, yes, that's true. But here we have some sort of visibility that this Revlimid can actually sustain for at least 4 to 5 years for 600 profits towards the end year, when everyone will come in with unlimited volumes. And by that time they are ready with some sort of pipeline. Whether they will be successful or not will be seen, and well, that's the business model. So that's the risk we will run at least for the next 2, 3, 4 years. Looks great, but after that during this time maybe we get some clarity, some visibility what happens to Imbruvica. Pomalyst has already been settled. I think these two drugs, if let's say they get Imbruvica as well, these two drugs alone, with the current market size that they have, they are equal to Revlimid. So I think that's the business model that they have. So we haven't really gone into doing detailed line by line projections and predicting the cash flows and hence doing the present value.
No, my point was not that, Rajat. My point was, when you value a company with one-time opportunity, you should value it on a sustainable business. What multiple should a sustainable business get, and one-time opportunities like Revlimid should be valued on NPV basis. Like, that was my only thing. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, Ankit, so on that, actually, it's true that it's one time, but if you see the last 3, 4 years, I mean, or 5 years, these are all one-time things that the company is doing. So Copaxone may not remain, and we are already saying it will go away in our projections and all. So Revlimid will come, but if you see, they have been able to sustain 500 crores of profit. So let's go back to the, let's say, slide, if we can, of P&L, so P&L we showed. So from FY 16 to 17, profits went up to 157, say 490 ho gaya. But then even in FY 20, it is at 460. So they have been able to sustain those profit either ways. Now, if Copaxone goes, Revlimid comes, while yes, Revlimid is a one-time opportunity, but I think it's the pharma model that you have. And over time, given this company is building a huge pipeline, like I said, in 2008 or 7, that's when they started focusing. So pipeline is now increasing. So earlier on, they had these 2-3 drugs, and now they have more than 2-3 drugs in the pipeline. So, so while this is definitely one time, or maybe may last for 3 years, 2 years, 4 years, 5 years, but that's the credit. That's where we need to rely on management, and that they are working on their pipeline and will be able to launch certain kind of products which will enhance the visibility. So here onwards, what we are seeing is that 500 crores have been maintained for the last 4 years, 5 years. Let's say FY21 also, FY22 also it will be maintained. So for 6 years they would be able to maintain 500. Now, can they maintain 1200 to 1500 kind of profits sustainably for 4-5 years? Seems so from Revlimid as well as few other initiatives. Obviously, Revlimid will be contributing major part to that, and after that, there is some visibility.
Sure, thanks.
Can I take up the domestic front question?
Sure.
Yeah, Saptarshi, you and then maybe Tarun also can take a shot at it. Yeah.
See, there are two things. First is domestic. Agree, there is a lot of competitive intensity, but there are like NATCO has also tried to create a niche for itself. So I think in one of the category BMT, I believe it is sort of a market leader. So while and their product portfolio base has expanded. Like earlier, if they are currently catering to, they have close to 30 plus products. So this is the first reason that we believe that, and every year they plan to launch 6 to 8 products annually. So while the competitive intensity is large over here, but that is more to do with Onco as a segment, the way it operates in India. But overall, as the opportunity size still exists, as the market will improve, the company should grow further. That's what my perception is. But competition has been there, but even with that, the company has been able to grow till FY19. That's what I would say. Just try to have a slightly longer picture. If we look at from FY14 to, let's say, FY19, 20% CAGR for a very in a market where the competitive intensity has increased. It is like it does sound that the company is trying to do a lot of good things.
Sure, thanks. Yeah.
So just if you can answer two of my questions, which is like, have you looked into other NCE filings for multiple myeloma and the base business sustainability overall? What is your view on that?
MM as a business, like I have read about the new about the new approval that has come, but what I have always thought about is the fact that see, MM overall as an opportunity is also quite growing, even in US, because for the fact that currently we are looking at around 10 to 15% of the patient who comes to treat MM. They also have a timeline of 12 months only. So in case, cause they are mostly the terminally ill patients that are coming. So once the MM market grows further, I think, and that can only grow because of the launch of a better drug. So I think that is the reason. If I'm talking about the new drug that is coming up over here, so they are trying to improve. They are trying to target more on these 10 to 15% of the population pool who only have a terminal life of 12 months. This is what my reading suggested, rather than the overall opportunity pool. That's what makes me believe that Revlimid as an opportunity is expected to remain stable.
Another thing on the sustainability, right? I mean, I think old investors, I think, feel a little bit disappointed that Copaxone, I think they promised 50%, 60% kind of market share, and it didn't come. I mean, they are still at 30-35% kind of volume market share. So if you go through conference calls for 5 years, or if you try to understand Copaxone is annual contracts, Teva played really smart. The innovator for Copaxone played really smart by offering rebates, but it has been a difficult market share for them to win, and there is no generic player which has come after Natco. So the earning might not go away also in a hurry. I mean, Rajiv has said in conference call that it's an annuity business and very high quality annuity business. So that 200-300 crore might stay as in the base earnings for 2-3-4 years. I mean, it might not go away in a hurry.
See, my question here is this. Wait, what I'm trying to say in Revlimid again, you have to distinguish between price increases versus the increase in volumes, the real sales. Because earlier when Celgene was there, it was able to raise prices in the way it wanted to. So when we see that there is a 20% increase, we have to be really clear whether it was because Celgene increased prices or the number of people taking therapy or whatever volumes, whatever way you calculate volumes that have gone up. Because Celgene had that kind of ability to increase prices, which these generic players might not have.
So yeah, I think we can get a volume data. We can try to get how much is a price growth and how much is a volume growth. But I mean, for generic, I'm hoping that the innovators' prices are the benchmark, and then you kind of count erosion from that.
Chalo, theek hai.
Yeah. The domestic pay, I think one question was there. Tarun, are you there? Maybe you want to answer in terms of competition.
Yeah, Rajat. So I think Anant had a question related to how sustainable the domestic market would be and what is the competition intensity. Is that the question, Anant?
Yeah, and Ankit also asked that
okay.
he feels a lot of competition has increased in oncology space. So have you done work on competition? Yeah.
See, our reading has been that from a pricing perspective, we really don't see too much of a pressure. They have positioned themselves very nicely from a pricing perspective. Okay, so from that perspective, we really don't see much of a pressure. Second thing is, even from a domestic pipeline perspective, the way they are building, to supplement their onco business, they started with Hep C. Somehow that business was more of a one-time opportunity. Now trying to broad base that with C&D division. If we really look at C&D division, there were a couple of multiple very interesting filings. Brilinta was one such opportunity, 150 crore kind of a thing with no competition in domestic market. They got injected. Brilinta, they got injected. The recent launch, which is again, this is within top 10 drug globally. So from a pipeline perspective, the way they are looking at molecule, etc., to some extent, they are trying to make this again a very differentiated kind of a business with not much of a competition to that. And going by the numbers also, they have been able to grow. Initially, they got 18% market share in domestic oncology. Now they got 20%. So this is how they are trying to protect it.
Okay.
Anand, just to answer your question in terms of numbers front, so actually Bristol Myers had conducted a survey. So at that, so as per them, the current number of US plus EU citizens who are their potential patients is close to 260K, and by FY27, by 2027, they expect the number to grow by 420K. This is majorly to do with the relapses as well as the increasing patient pool that will increase because the company is trying to conduct certain because the company is conducting certain supplementary research which is basically trying to detect the patients a bit earlier compared to when they come to doctor.
Okay.
Guys, two questions. Dhwanil here. So first is I think very good presentation, a lot of good data points. So thanks for doing this. So first one is when we look at the complexion of this US patented molecule market, it has been increasingly moving in favor of biologics. So out of top 20, I think 12 of the drugs are biologics now. And since these guys have a business model where they want to capture upon this kind of multi-billion-dollar opportunities which are not genericized yet, if they don't have this biologics capability, how are they going to hold on to this model in next 5, 7, 10 years? Any views on that? And second is on the agro side, my understanding is that they are talking about having their own distribution. Now, that's a completely different ballgame than what they played for entering the US market. And, agri market is dominated by a lot of large companies having very vast distribution network. So, I mean, why are they not choosing the partnership route? And I think it's going to be a tough task to go down the distribution route and get the market share in a completely new segment. So again, any thoughts on that?
I too have questions on agro. The first question is, what is the need to get into it when you already have such a vast market in terms of, you know, uh, in drugs? So why do you really want to go into agro? How does it fit the business model, thought process? Because I mean, in general, I kind of don't understand this need. That's the first point itself. I mean, does the management have an answer to that? That's the first question. Second question is that this entire patent and patent related challenges that the company has been doing, it's in the US markets. It's not in the Indian markets. You don't know that, if the company kind of challenges on CTPR and the other molecule, there would be other people who would be ready to manufacture those molecules, and you don't know the intricacies of how Indian system works, because up to now the entire challenging was in the US courts and how the US markets behaved on patents. The third question is, both CTPR and I forgot the name of the other molecule. In both of them, I know Indian domestic technical manufacturers who are also ready to manufacture the same drug or the same technical, but just because it is patented, they're not going ahead. So I won't be surprised, depending on how the patent laws are viewed in India or are applied by the court in India. It kind of, the uncertainty is very, very high. The fourth thing which Dhanil said on formulations. Now, from my understanding, the formulators themselves in India, the large formulators are kind of ganged up. They are kind of, they kind of control how distribution happens in India to a large extent. Now, if you are getting directly into formulation, I'm not really certain, as to how this strategy would work out, rather than partnering with the formulators. So those are my questions.
So maybe I can take first shot. So with this question about biologics was asked in one of the AGMs. Kiran actually asked this question. The answer wasn't convincing. They said that there are a lot of investments are required in biologics, and that is why they are not doing it. That was the answer they gave. Another thing is, if you look at the older annual reports, 2013, 2014, around that, they had talked about trying to get into biologic business, but that never happened. So we don't know what happens in biologics, and yes, that is a risk. Another thing we need to think about is primarily they have been focused on oncology, right? So I don't know if with this kind of cash flow and all, I mean, are there no big molecules in cardiovascular? Are there no molecules in other therapies, neural kind of domains? So maybe that is another thing. We don't know the pipeline. Maybe they're already working on it. So that is another thing. I mean, if you look at the annual report commentaries, pharma is what, 1 trillion market. They are addressing probably 15, 20 billion. So maybe they will be able to find 1 or 2 or 3 molecules, but we don't know for sure. And with NATCO, you can't know anything for sure. That is another thing. One thing is if Revlimid plays out, right? I mean, if Revlimid plays out and they go to this, let's say they get 1,000 crore profit for 2-3 years with 3,000 crore, and they already have 1,000 crore cash in the bank. With 3,000-4,000 kind of crore cash in the bank, I mean, you can do a lot of things. And they have made small investment. They have a 10 crore, 15 crore investment in one innovator company in the US. That investment is there for 3, 4, 5 years. And they're probably trying to learn the game, how innovation happens, what happens there. So that is another thing. So if there is no easy answer to that question, what happens to biologics? That is one. On why they are not partnering with distribution builders with agricultural players, I don't know is their strategy. But in domestic oncology or domestic pharma side, they have their own distribution, right? So it's not like they're trying to build a distribution for first time. Maybe they will fail 2-3 years. They will learn, they will adapt, they will modify. But I don't think the current near term, at least, thesis is based on agricultural business. It's an evolving dynamic situation, and I think they need to be flexible about it, and we need to be flexible about it. Yeah, maybe Rajat, you want to take?
Just one thing, in the domestic market also they have fought litigations. It's not that they're fighting the litigations over here for the first time. So when they fought for I guess in 2003 only for Veena they had fought for a litigation, and as well as they fought against Bayers for the Nexavar.
Correct. Pomalidomide, for example, pomalidomide is already launched in India. That I think litigation they did in 2012 or 13. So on pharma side, they have done domestic litigation.
On the distribution side, I think comparing it to USA is not part to like to like, because in USA they went ahead with the litigation side with the distribution tie-up because of litigations. You know, when they started launching para 4 complex drugs and filing for those drugs in USA, their PAT was 150 crores, and those drugs litigation cost could be $40-50 million. So just to safeguard themselves, that's how they started doing the distribution tie-ups. So just being risk covers there, and I think in Canada they have their own distribution, front end distribution. So all the Revlimid profits in Canada they are going to garner in their own pocket. Similarly, I think in agrichem that's what they want to do. I think nothing, we don't know much detail, but I think just my hunch that they are looking at this opportunity as a long-term opportunity. It's not just one time 1 or 2 launch of products. So they want to launch more products here basically. And management also indicated in the investor meets that what they did in USA with the pharma products, they want to do the same with the agri-chemical products.
Rajat, this is Tarun. I'll try to add a couple of points to this. I think there was a very good question as to why to get into agri in the first place. So possibly management would have a better answer to it, but in my sense, based on the reading, whatever I had and tracking the management, somewhere this business also fits into their overall business model itself. And they got a very templatized kind of a business model. A big opportunity, limited competition. Ideally into pharma. If not, then adjacent business would be into crop science kind of a thing. The fact is that this again is a big opportunity, limited competition, and their guidance is that they will continue with this template to look at another opportunities. I was reading a couple of articles around that. So the way for pharma, the patent cliff has worked out. Agrochem is at that same juncture at this point of time. By next 3 years, there is close to 5 billion worth of opportunity, which is going off patent. So somewhere, to diversify their business base, having multiple stream of revenue. And that also is a very compelling reason for them to look at diversification. All of those which we are looking at, be that Canada, be that agroscience, etc. Learning from the history, their Hep C business, Copaxone, etc. were very lumpy in the nature. 1 or 2 years, those would be blockbuster, but then there would be a stagnation. To kind of mitigate that business risk and to build a base business, which is annuity kind of a business, they will get into diversification. That's my reading about it. Now, the question would be why front end? So upfrontly, we are saying agro at this point of time, we are really not counting too much into it. And we have not factored that into projection. But as an evolving business, this looks promising for the fact that somewhere we feel that this is play on the international market. Domestic is just to start with, experiment and test the water. Eventually, their aspiration would be global. So from that perspective, theoretically, yes, they should have got into distribution for domestic market. But if the aspiration and focus is in global market, that is where they will channelize their energy. Quite possible. The third question was related to what if in the domestic market the patent got challenged, and what is it which is stopping the competitor from come by, right? For any of those competitive market or a free market environment, those possibilities would always be there. It would always be a function of your marketing skills and chemistry skills, both put together. Are you able to crack that particular market or not? So from that perspective, yes, certain established players are already there. For example, PI would be a much, PI industry would be in a better position if they got a in licensing from the innovator, and that possibly could be a apprehension I would have always. So those dynamics would be there. It's more of a business decision that they have taken.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Devil's advocate, Donald? You're on mute, I think, Donald.
Yeah. Many of those initial questions are over. I think the main main issue that people have is about the management claims of building diversified revenue streams, and that is something that we are seeing is running into problems. Oncology, even though they had that great run post the 2019 annual non-scheduled drugs in inclusion, we've seen a steep climb down. Of course, there is also the COVID-related issues that will affect this year. So oncology is not a growth driver, significant growth driver. Probably, I think you guys have also factored in domestic growth at 5-8%, if I'm not mistaken. So if domestic is not, then what is left for the diversified base to come up in the next 2-3 years? It's Canada and Brazil. And again, there, if you see Brazil, they've been trying to do for a long time. It's not that they haven't been trying to fight. It's standard driven. All those aspects are there that they're trying to build, and it's not come up to any significant share yet. Canada is the one where it is coming up to significant share, but again, it's probably the Revlimid story there which will make it a significant share. And post Revlimid, what is there? So Canada is a mirror of the US market totally. So it's not a really, it depends on, of course, the settlements and that kind of things that they're able to get. So I don't see too much of a diversified base there. And therefore, I think that the management is seeing agrichem as the diversified revenue stream of the future. But that is, again, something that has to play out. And therefore, I don't see in the next 2, 3, 4 years this becoming, it's more on hope rather than visibility. So where do I see strong visibility of a diversified revenue stream? I don't see in domestic. Oncology, hepatitis C is going down. I don't see there. So strong visibility is probably only in Canada, and that too predicated on Revlimid again. So this agrichem is something that the management is also betting on, I think, mostly from the diversified revenue stream. And also, as Rajat mentioned, Tarun mentioned about the impending opportunities coming there on a global basis. So yes, that is a big hope, and I wish that the management is able to execute there and they have some good lucky breaks. I wish that the approvals come, the litigation goes in their favor. These are all hope things, which has to play out. So there's a lot of hope built. In fact, even in Revlimid, there is hope built, right? It's not yet. They're supposed to get it by December, and December is almost over, and there's no noise from management, or I don't know when they will answer that, or maybe it will come in January. We don't know. But again, so these are the things there that the diversified revenue stream is still uh, far far from getting executed. That's my objection to this whole hypothesis. Otherwise, excellent projections, excellent data put up by you. I think it makes for a good business. And we see it in 3-4 years what happens, and then accordingly can take decisions. So anything people have to say, you people have to say about defending this diversified revenue stream visibility, I would like to get educated on.
Well, on the diversification of the revenues, you are right, Donald. It's gonna take time.
And over there also, they are trying to grow like a step function. That's something which, it's not a secular growth story where you set up a factory and things start happening. They are again they're trying to try something niche, something very unique. That's that is that we agree.
I mean, basically, business model of the company is different. We as investors want it to be something else. That's it.
But I think they have taken into cognizance this part of that they have to diversify. They have to diversify. They keep talking in management calls so many times. They've been talking
Donald,
of diversified revenue base right from 2011 interviews actually.
So Donald, if Revlimid was not a a very good opportunity, let's say it was 100-200 crore kind of an opportunity, diversification had already happened, because the revenue mix would not look very different. Revenue mix will look very equally distributed amongst, let's say, between India and USA, and we will see Canada catching up. But this is the business model where Revlimid is a good opportunity. So be it. Let it be.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't do anything. So
sure.
I think that's the business model.
But as it grows in market cap, and as it grows with the war chest of cash that Rupesh pointed out, I think company management has enough smarts to execute on that. Maybe do some smart acquisitions. I think they're on a very strong wicket on that front to mitigate this diversified thing. They have so far tried organically. They've been saying we want to do it organically. Maybe they haven't done it, but inorganically, certainly the next 3-4 years, some things are happening. So that gives us confidence to stay invested.
In other way, diversification is nothing but reinvestment, right? So what's happening in this story is, what people are thinking is that, hey, last 3.5 years, how much money has been reinvestment in this business, right? Probably 1,200 to 1,300 crore. How much cash has been generated? Double of that. So yeah, this business is not reinvesting. Then what's the use of the future cash which gets generated, right? Are they going to come back as a dividend? Well, we as an investor, we don't want that, right? And that's where management needs to show, right? Okay, hey, how am I going to use this money, right? And once the management shows that, yep, it's a different story. It changes from excellent to exceptional. But at this point of time, it stays at excellent.
So on this, I think on the cash front, they have stated intention that incrementally they want to participate more in the profit share, which essentially means they want to keep cash for the litigation purposes. So again, that would happen in partnership. They are not going to go alone. So for example, we don't know that but maybe Bruvika or Pomalist have 50% market share. We don't know that. But litigation, if litigation cost of Bruvika is very high, then they will have to participate in that. And for Nexavar, we know it's 50% profit share.
Okay, आयुष आप भी काफी टाइम से ट्रैक कर रहे हो. How do you see this? I think you have probably invested longest amongst all of us.
I have not been longest invested, but yeah, some of our clients and mentors, they have invested very, very early in this company, and it has been on and off 2-3 times. But yeah, they have stayed put for the last few years. So I was saying that in companies like this or businesses like this, it's really tough to put a value or something, because they get on some disproportionate opportunities. Matlab, these are non-linear businesses, and management ka 5 years baad kya pipeline hoga, you will come to know maybe 2 years down the line or something like that. Matlab, after 2 years you come to know there's another 2-3 molecules which are very large or something like that. That is where things will go to the next level. Or maybe in Revlimid, if it becomes something where they are able to protect their market share, that is what will be the disproportionate outcome. So that's the tough part, I think, to really put numbers or figure out something. But to my mind, I think there's a lot of value when the management of this pedigree gives a number in a public con call that we will double our profitability, and they have a track record wherein they have been able to protect some broad revenues and numbers for the company by doing something or the other. So when we talk about diversification, new areas, yes, these things have not worked in last 3 years. But these are cycles also. Matlab ki it can happen in 3 years down the line, all these Brazil, Canada, India might be larger than what we are expecting, because these have not worked till now, and these things may get working in coming years. But yeah, it's not easy. The company has grown. The numbers are much bigger. It's a much more difficult thing to do today. Matlab 10 years back, 15 years back, nobody was doing this, and Natco was doing something new. So that is where they did this proportionate thing. Today, there are so many companies who know this opportunity. So it is definitely not easy for them. Disproportionate may happen from agro side or something like that. But I think, but when I hear con calls and I listen to management, I do feel that they are people who have a team, who have a culture, who have a system by which they can keep doing these things again and again.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Thank you, presenters, and thank you. The Q&A was also great. I think this is what makes these exercises so much more fruitful.
Yeah. So thank you guys. Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
Cheers.
Thank you, guys.